All 80s, all the time. Hey, folks, it's DJB Productions here, and it's those crazy 80s. And tonight we're talking about arcade madness. And if you grew up in the 80s, you know what I'm talking about. And I am joined tonight by Jason and Matt. Let's bring them on the screen, and we're going to be talking some serious stuff about the 80s. There he is. Look at these guys.
Yeah, showing our age.
Well, hey, thanks for joining tonight,
Hey,
and we're
anytime,
talking
anytime.
we're talking video games, man. So uh, let's jump right into your experience. So when did it start for you? Let's start with Jason.
Oh man, I had a friend when I was, gosh, I was probably like 11 or 12 that had a Pong uh, a game to hook up to his TV, and Pong was just it was like table tennis, but there was just paddles on either side that moved up and down, and
Right.
a little ball. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And little did I know what video games were going to eventually become. But from there came Space Invaders and Asteroids and all that. And the graphics were always like really really lame, but to us as kids, it was amazing.
Well,
It
I
was
mean,
the greatest thing in the world.
when you say that they were lame, you we had no basis of
Right, we
comparison.
had nothing to compare it to. So at the time, it was like the greatest thing ever.
Right.
But looking
Like you
back,
compare it to today,
right,
obviously, or even
exactly.
5 years from then.
Yeah.
Right, right. But at the moment, you're like, what the living fuck is this?
Yeah. It was almost like pinball was almost like phasing out. Like pinball got a little old, you know, and it was before they got all those tricked out pinball machines. Um, but then yeah, Asteroids came out, and then Atari, the original Atari console came out, and you could play these games at home. And they came out with their own set of games that weren't even associated with anything in the arcades and all that good stuff. I spent so much time and so much money in the arcades when I was a
Well,
teenager. It was
that was
ridiculous.
my next question, and I'm going
Yeah.
to bounce this over to Matt. Was your experience with video games in an arcade, not at home?
For Jason or for me?
For
Yeah,
you,
for
Matt.
you.
For me,
Said Matt.
um, well, for for me, it was. I wouldn't say necessarily the full full on with the arcades. At least not at first, because I was a little bit younger. I was when it really started having its peak there in the early '80s. I was like 7, 8 years old. So it's not like I was going out like full on to the arcades, but usually if it was family or friends going out to eat, used to be would be a lot of times like in the restaurants or the small bars. They would have a machine in there. So that's kind of where it started for me. So my biggest thing was first exposure was mainly with the Atari home console, which was great because
Really?
I could play all those games at least until I got another couple of years older, and then the local mall had an arcade. So then if it was like you're going with your parents, whatever, they were doing some shopping, it's like here's some quarters. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Stay busy.
me
You
me and
lost.
my
Beat it.
cousin. It was using a couple of us. So either a couple of friends or me and one or two of my cousins. So we always kind of had that group. Everybody keeping an eye on each other, and it was like, yeah, there you go down to the arcade, and then it was we're in there and playing like you said like asteroids and space invaders and dig dug and Galaga and Defender,
Dig
all
Dug
these,
was the shit.
Yeah, it was.
yeah,
It
I
was.
yeah,
love Dig Dug.
Yeah.
I was a
Dig Dug
big
was good.
Tempest guy. You guys
Tempest
Yeah,
was
remember Tempest?
awesome. Yes.
yeah, Tempest was good. My big
That
one was similar line with a Centipede.
Yeah.
Centipede was great as well. Um, Tempest was the only one that I felt any command over, and I think it's just because of my mathematical brain. I could,
Yeah,
there's something about it that made sense to me. But a lot of those other games. So we're getting to the arcade thing. I want to start there because before the home consoles, and even though home consoles existed, I get it. And I want to go there at one point, but I want to start really with the arcade, the world of arcade, because it was such a great world.
Yeah.
So I grew up here in Delco, suburb of Philadelphia, and the Granite Run Mall, which no longer exists,
Yeah.
the mall.
Aladdin's Castle.
Aladdin's
My
Castle.
man, he knows
Aladdin's
it.
Castle.
Yeah.
And the reason Aladdin's Castle has such a deep resonance with me is because my performance career started there as a performer, because Aladdin's Castle also had bands performing. But the entire place, I mean, you've been there, right? You remember it.
Yeah. That's
It was
and going to the mall. That's where we were at.
It was such a very cool, like that. It was dark and mysterious, and it was just lined with everything you could imagine. And yeah, that was where we hung. It was, and as a 15-year-old kid, you were allowed to smoke in the mall. So like I'd play a couple of games and go out and smoke a cigarette, and it's how I started my first band. But that's where it started for me. Like the home console thing came really late in my life, but the culture of we saw this. If you watch the Stranger Things episodes, I was so excited that they played on that, where they were at the arcade.
Yeah.
They were at this
Oh,
place.
well, the great thing is it was all the different sounds.
It was a teenage bar, is what it was.
I mean, it was just the sounds, the lights, and I mean, it was just it was like sensory overload, being in there. And it was it was almost essentially a small sense of community in there, because the fact that it's like you'd be watching other people playing games while you're waiting to get on that game, and
Nice.
there we go.
I think that's me.
But it's like you're sitting there in you got like guys are you see they're about to break like the high score, and you're excited to see if he's going to do it or she's going to do it, and it was cool, and talking to other people about hey man, what's your favorite game? That's my favorite game. It's like if it had a 2-player option, be like, all right, come on, get your quarters up here, you and me gonna take you on, and it was cool. I mean, it was a great sense of community. I mean, it was actual human interaction at its most basic level.
Yeah. And there was ownership of it too, because you were throwing quarters in there. That was your hard-earned cash at the time, and so you were vested. You were vested in what you were doing. You're like, I'm staying in this game. You got to stay in the game.
Yeah.
And
got
that
quarters lined up at the edge of the screen.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Do you want to continue? You bet I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can put your quarter up and like, I'm next.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There was that gunslinger attitude.
Yeah.
Clink. I got.
And I just remember when Pac-Man first came out, that was a game changer, because it was like I don't know, it's just like the fad at the time, and everything, like everywhere you went, there was a Pac-Man stuff
everywhere,
plush or whatever, and it was just, they even had that song, the Pac-Man Fever song. Do you guys remember that?
Yes.
And then that was so popular, they put out a whole album with like, there was a Donkey Kong song, and it nothing took off like the Pac-Man Fever did, but I could probably recite most of those lyrics to this day. But then when I was, I guess, like 10th grade, maybe 11th, is when Dragon's Lair came out, and that was like an animated video game that really, it was almost like it was on a laser disc, and by you tapping the joystick to a certain direction helps finish the story. So it really wasn't like you were controlling the character, but just knowing where to move and dodge, and it was like a live action choose your own adventure book. Exactly. And when I finished that, man, I was the shit. I felt so good about myself. I was
Yeah.
But yeah, Tron was another amazing. I got it behind my head.
That one was intense.
I
That was an
loved
intense
Yeah.
game.
Tron. That was my all-time favorite game. I could never get like more than like 4 levels because each level you had to do 4 different games, and then it progressively got harder. And that was actually before the movie. So when the Tron movie came out, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my god, my
Mhm.
head exploded. I'm like, this is going to be amazing, and it was good for its time, but it
No,
really,
I think it still holds up. I think
yeah,
for what that movie was, in terms of the aesthetic,
yeah,
it was
Mhm.
so beyond its time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I really do.
When you consider how they created those effects, you know,
Yeah, it
given
was
the
a
time period,
groundbreaking movie for
it
sure.
was it was unreal.
Yeah,
I think it is to be bold in this statement. I would say it was the ultimate CGI for its time.
Mhm.
yes, yeah. I
Though
would
it
agree.
wasn't using the same technology, but the end result to me, I look back at that. I watch old videos of that movie, and I'm like, it's like that's CGI.
Yeah,
At that time, that time frame, that's fascinating to me.
yeah,
You know,
You know, and
uh,
it's just, I mean, it was great because I mean, too, let's say because you had not only your arcades, but like we say, like I kind of mentioned earlier, you had bars, restaurants. Eventually, you had your convenience stores. A lot of
right.
times would have a game in there. I mean, I know being a kid, like seventh, eighth grade, so you're figuring like somewhere in between like 86 and 87, walking home from school and walking by, and they're the deli on the way home.
Yeah,
The pizza place had like NHL hockey and like
yeah,
Street Fighter in it.
yeah,
And then you had the other deli up the street had like a bunch of different ones in there. They kind of like rotated stuff out. And they were some of like the not as a little bit more obscure ones, but I mean it was cool because it seemed like every about 6 or 7 months you'd walk in there, they'd have a different machine in there.
yeah, yeah,
And it was cool
well,
because
yeah.
it was like
I
you'd
guess
stop on the way home, grab something to drink, mess around on the arcade games.
yeah, I remember walking home from school and walking to a place called Gibson's, which is now one of the greatest coffee shops in media. But at the time, it was called Gibson's, and they only had two arcade games in there. Because I mean, and I'm assuming this was kind of a vendor thing. Vendors would come by and go, "Hey,
Yeah.
can we put a game in here? We'll give you a cut. You know, we'll give you a cut of the bread of the. And there were two games in there. There was Dig Dug and Tempest. And for some reason, Tempest just worked for me. Like it made sense to me. I guess because of the controls. Because remember, this is the big console, right? Where
yeah.
you had the circular thing, and
It
you're
was
like,
like a dial.
Yeah.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
a dial.
yeah,
Yeah.
It was a dial, and I
Yeah.
completely connected with that. And
yeah,
then my buddy, who I'd walk home from school with, he'd be sitting there killing the Dig Dug game. He was like, "Oh, I got this." And then that's when I guess it was a few years after that all of a sudden you could have that stuff at home. Not Tempest,
Mm.
but Dig Dug, and a few others. But
Donkey
Mm.
Kong.
Donkey
You
Kong.
Donkey,
could play
Yeah.
that.
yeah.
And
And the thing is too, and it's it was such a massive craze too. It's like just like any other generation before and after, everybody kind of figured there's got to be something, it's going to be bad, it's going to be so terrible for everybody, you know. Actually, we do have a news clip, um, from news report from the early 80s here, that we can go ahead and play. Uh,
Oh,
yeah. So, Mr.
let's play
Producer,
that.
do
Let's
you
play
have that
that.
ready for us? Because we'd love to see this here. Puts everything into perspective here. Oh, see, look at Mr. Producer. Mr. Producer slacking.
Come on.
Well, they come as if from outer space in a variety of weird guises. Defender, Pac-Man, asteroids. To fans, they represent a challenge. But to critics, as Terry Drinkwater reports, they are a menace.
Come on in. It's almost another world here in the video arcades of America. 1 billion games are played every month, a quarter each for Escape, which can last a long time if you're skilled. Pitch yourself against the computer. Millions, mostly teenagers, have. So many, in fact, that psychologists are beginning to worry that some youths are becoming spaced out on the space games.
You can't get hooked on it.
Are you?
Yeah. It keeps on making you play the game. Once you start to play it for a while, you keep on playing it.
Any normal person would want to beat the machine.
And you come back?
Oh, sure.
Again?
Oh, sure.
Again?
Yeah.
Many cities have reacted by making the arcades off limits to all under 17 from 8 to 3. This is the after-school rush in Oakland. Long hours at the screens, psychologists say, can lead to extreme introversion. Youngsters communicating in a video fantasy land and not with their peers or parents.
It's not addictive in the sense of a drug dependency where you're going to have withdrawal symptoms, but it is physically, you can become physically dependent upon it because you get an arousal and then a relaxation response. It's the same as a roller coaster or gambling or playing cards intensely.
Many teenagers are frank in admitting their dependency.
Well, it's the moving lights partly. Some of these games are really hard to do. It just takes a lot of skill, hand-eye coordination, and it doesn't cost as much as some other things, and it's legal.
Yeah, it's addictive. It is. Because you sit there and you just want to play it more and more.
We don't really prefer to use the word addictive. We think it's associated with negative connotations. We prefer to use the term compelling and highly popular, which obviously they are.
And the manufacturers add they teach a bit about computers, too. This is the current craze game, Pac-Man.
I like the little man. He's really neat. He eats up all the other things, you know.
How about that Pac-Man song that I hear around here all the time?
Yeah, you sing it a lot. You hum it.
Indeed, and play it on the jukebox at full volume. Psychologists remind us every younger generation has to have something to scare adults. Right now, all of this is certainly it. Terry Drinkwater, CBS News, San Francisco.
Okay. A lot of poignant stuff there. And it's interesting because I get it. Like, you know, and I remember when I was young in that process, I remember like I went down that rabbit hole where it was like, well, this is a training ground. This is a training ground for the next generation of soldiers. I went there. Like I went into that mindset. Like, you know, if you can cognitively figure out this algorithm on a game, then you're an asset, right? Because remember, we're still in the Cold War in the 80s, right? Like I'm this young kid, and I've always been a thinker, which has gotten me into a lot of trouble. But I remember thinking like, okay, these video games are here for a reason. They're there to recruit. And maybe I said that because I sucked at them so bad. I was like, I'm no good at this. But having said that, because it's interesting, because the newscast said about like, you know, the insulary ramifications of this kind of thing. I don't know if I looked at it that deeply. I saw the positive in it. But over the years, and again, I've been so detached from the current gaming now, because it's not even that, it's gaming, like, you know, the virtual reality, they lead, you know, that's a whole different world. I don't know if we're going to get into that discussion, but
well, you know, when it comes down to it, I mean, it's just like anything else. Too much of it can be a bad thing, depending upon your personality.
Right.
You know, there are people that have just highly addictive personalities, and you know, you get them hooked on something, no matter what it is, it takes over their life, and it's like they can't do anything else. You know what I mean? You know, versus, you know, you take it from what most people did. You know, it was a distraction. It was something to do to occupy your time. It was exciting. It got the adrenaline pumping. It's like, again, I've got behind me, I've got River Raid and the Empire Strikes Back from the Atari 2600 console. And, they were probably the ones I played the most because, again, I didn't have a ton of games. So because, my family, we couldn't really afford a lot of that stuff. So I felt very fortunate, that I had, a console period, and the games that I did have, I was very selective, about the games that I got. And I mean, but these things, I play them all the time. But it was usually, like if the weather outside was bad, it was terrible rain, it was too nasty to go outside. It was a nasty storm. Or it was at night, when it was like, okay, it's dark, everybody's got to go in, okay. Had dinner, watch a little TV with the family, an hour or two on the console, and then it's okay, hey, time for bed, and off you go. But
Yeah, I don't know how many times like I told my parents, I finished my homework. I'm going to play my Atari, and meanwhile my grades are slipping, and
Yeah.
but at least I got the high score,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, I'll be honest. I've got an Xbox Series X, and not just for the video games, but for a while it was like that was your entertainment hub. It was almost like your cable box. It linked you to different apps and things like that. It's a Blu-ray player and a 4K player, all that good stuff. But there's games that I'll play. I'll play the Tiger Woods golf games. Any Batman game that comes out, I'm all over.
Okay.
And I just ordered Dead Island 2, which is coming out next week, which is like a zombie video game where you can mod these different weapons together and stuff like that, and just like kick zombie ass.
So on that point, what was your trajectory? And this is to both of you.
Okay.
What was your trajectory through your gaming, right? So we're talking starting from the arcade game, the arcade establishments where you would, get your quarters, go play the game. There was some social interaction. And then now you're in your private area where you're developing. So what was your development in tastes for private gaming? How did that evolve for you two?
You know what? I think it really all started like as an adult. It really all started when the original NES came out, the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Yeah.
Um, and like back in the day, it was you're beating your high score. You always want to improve on your high score or get to a higher level or what have you.
Okay.
Now, what video games are is like you complete the story, and then beyond completing the
Oh,
story,
wow.
you have to then go back and find all the hidden Easter eggs and shit that get you achievements. Where
So it's almost like there's an origin story to the story that you already completed.
absolutely, yeah,
Holy shit!
yeah. The little side missions and stuff.
Well,
Oh my god!
Yeah, and the thing is, there's kind of like the old, I forget where I read it. It was probably on a T-shirt or something, but it was all like, something about the fact that like, when I was a kid, you didn't finish a video game.
Right.
It just got harder and faster until you died, just like life.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's kind of one of those things where
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
and
I
I think for the modern gaming, where it kind of loses that edge, because it's like if I'm sitting there and I'm playing, I can sit here and go, especially now as an adult, be all like, okay, I got to find a save point, or I got to complete a certain thing or whatever. I've got to a certain point and it's already auto saved my game, so you know what? I got to go to bed. I got to get up in the morning. I'll stop playing, and all my stuff's there. But back then, it was all like,
oh yeah, you turn
there
it
was
off
no
and you're
save.
done. Yeah.
It was like it's like and I said I said I got River Raid there behind me, but there was a thing where apparently the developer, if you ever basically rolled the score I forget. I think it was like 99,999 points. I think once you hit that, it was only set up to go to 5 figures, and it would replace all the digits with a question mark.
Oh wow.
And if you got to that point, you could take a picture of your TV screen showing that and mail that into the developer, and they would send you a patch.
Yes, I remember that. Oh
They
my
would send you a
gosh.
patch, and it was like one of those things. I mean, I never got that far, but you think about it. You're sitting there at like, let's say, 90,000 points, and mom says, "All right, time to go to bed." You're sitting there going, "No!"
Yeah.
As soon as I turn it off, I got to start all over again.
Yeah.
That's interesting because do you guys remember I think it was called Ragnar. We're going back to the 80s.
Was it
Not
hold on.
like an
that one.
arcade game?
Hold on, maybe Danny will research.
Maybe our
this.
producer can look that up for us.
Pull it up. I think it was called Ragnar. The reason I'm bringing this up because it speaks to your story. I had just left high school, and let's just pretend the name is Ragnar. Maybe Danny will find it. And I was shacked up at this house for a while I was rehearsing with this band. I had this video game, which I recall is Ragnar. And it was like, one of these games that had levels and levels and levels. You had to always meet the boss, right?
Yeah, boss level.
Yeah, the boss, right? So we're sitting there and we're doing all kinds of illegal activities and drinking and doing stupid shit, but we're playing this game. Me and my drummer, we're just playing this game. And we're killing it. And we're almost at the top. We've almost got to the last boss. Somebody comes down, it's like 6 a.m. We've been up all night. We've been up all night.
Wow.
That's how dedicated we were. Somebody comes down the steps and shuts a switch off, which was connected to the game.
Oh
No.
yeah, the old switched
Gone.
outlets.
And we were literally about to go up against the final boss, which would so he and I look at each other and we're devastated, but we're so gacked that we're like, start it over. This was 8 a.m. And by 9 p.m. that night, we beat the game.
No way.
Nice.
After the shutdown, because we just kept going. Like, we were that dedicated. And the addiction to that end game. And what was weird for me was when we beat the game, I felt extremely lonely.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's ever if you two have ever experienced that where you killed the shit out of a game and you're like, that was great, and then 10 minutes later you're like, oh fuck.
It's like there's nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like it's almost like that movie thing. It's like, if you have nothing to fight for, because you get that vested, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a gamer. But correct me if I'm wrong. When you get that vested into a game, has it ever happened to you two where you beat the game and you're like, I feel like a piece of shit?
You know what I think it is? Is like, while you're using up so much like dopamine when you're playing these games because you're
That's
excited
I like that.
and shit, and
Yeah,
then
good point.
and then it's over and it's like, wow, you just spent yourself, and then it's like, man, I'm fucking depressed now,
Yeah.
So you've experienced that yourself?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and the thing is though too, and there on the flip side of that though too, there's a few games that I've played that it follows a certain storyline, and it's like you see the ending.
Yeah.
And like it's like setting up because like there's like it's like the developers putting out more and more, whether sometimes they're direct sequels and sometimes it's not a direct sequel, but it's just a similar gameplay, but it's under the same title.
Yeah.
But it's like you get to the end, and all of a sudden it's like you beat the game, but the ending is like so totally like you wouldn't expect it. There's this one game you beat it. It's like you're taking on like this leader. He's kind of like a Jim Jones kind of cultist type, doomsday, leader type.
Don't
guy,
drink the cold.
Yeah, and like at the end, it's like you're playing a cop, and at the end, like you finally take him down. You take down him and his family, and you take him into custody, and it's like what you don't realize in the background, like there's different like news reports going on that like there's increased tensions between the United States and Russia or whatever, and blah. And at the end, you're taking this guy into custody, and then there's a news report where like there's suddenly like all out nuclear war. And as you're taking this guy into custody, there's like ICBMs coming in over the horizon and shit, and you're trying to then race now to an underground bunker that this guy's got set up, and it's just like, oh my God. And you're sitting there going like, okay, yeah, I beat this guy. And then find out that, at the end, the guy gets out of his cuffs. He drags you into this freaking bunker. And now he's got you captive in this bunker during a nuclear attack. So you're going to be captive in the bunker with this guy for years.
It's almost like, yeah, that's crazy because it almost
like, I can't believe it.
It almost sounds to me like these video games, like the ones you're talking about, which I've never experienced, but the ones you're talking about sound like these multi-universes, right? Where you complete this idea, right, and then the next thing you know, you're like, oh my God, there's this other thing, It's like having a whole different universe happening.
And looks like we lost Jason.
Jason, where'd you go, man? I guess you went to play a game. Did you go to play a game?
I don't know. Maybe he had some connectivity issues, so hopefully we'll get him back in there. But like right now, like we're saying, like now that these developers, are kind of bringing in sequels and everything else for some of these games. But back at the height of the arcade craze. Not only did we have, the video games, but then these developers were also then, going and making deals with animation studios, and they were putting out cartoons.
Yeah.
So I mean, like now we see like movies coming out based on video games, and a lot of like the younger generation, that are coming up going like, oh yeah, they're making a movie out of whatever, and it's like, dude, when we were kids, you played Pac-Man or Frogger on Friday night, and you were watching the Frogger cartoon Saturday morning.
Right.
And I mean, there was actually, and I can't remember now exactly where, but it was a Saturday one. It was called the Super Funcade. If I'm recalling correctly, I know our producer has a clip here, and I'm probably saying the name wrong because it's been so long since we watched it, and but if our producer can actually bring that up, we've actually got the intro to it. Here we go.
Oh wow!
Saturday Supercade, that's what it was. Donkey Kong. There you go, and there's Mario. That's where Mario came from, baby.
Yeah.
Pitfall. Pitfall Harry. Qbert. That's what we want to talk about. Qbert.
Wow.
Donkey Kong Jr.
It's Saturday Supercade. Today on Saturday Supercade.
And it's like, what really always amazed me was the fact that these writers could come up with an entire cartoon based on a game that literally Frogger trying to cross the street, jumping on lily pads, the backs of turtles to get back into your lily pad.
Yeah, that's why they made the big bucks.
Yeah.
Look at that. They get the whole storyboard. Yeah, you know what? That really dates me because this was after me. That was after me. Like
Yeah.
my Saturday mornings were like Tarzan, Godzilla.
Yeah.
That was it, and then I was out the door. So like this came after me. So
Yeah, like I
I'm-
agree. I agree. Like these cartoons were like early '90s, and I think
Mid 80s.
mid '80s. Okay, so
Maybe our
like
producer
Chris, you and
can
I
look
were
up
in.
the actual dates for Saturday.
Yeah, so Chris, you and I
Okay.
were like in high school, and like we're
yeah,
either going to the football game or going to a concert
or
or doing
doing
something
other
like that.
things that we will not speak of.
Right,
Yeah.
right, behind the bleachers, and um, yeah. So I didn't, Saturday morning cartoons were a thing in the past when I was that age, like when this cartoon came out. But all these young pups that we're doing the show with,
Yeah.
they
And you know what?
Yeah.
The amazing thing is that our age difference, like right now, isn't all that significant.
right. But
No.
back
But
when we were younger,
when you're talking about that, I have this conversation all the time with like my wife because she's
yeah,
about 5.5 years younger than me, and I'll like reference something. She'd be like, "I'm like, that's right, you're too young to remember." And she's
yeah,
like, "I'm only like 5.5 years younger than you," and I'm like, "Yeah, but that came out when you were 2."
yeah,
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I was like 7 or 8. You were
right.
2.
Yeah, but the participation
yeah.
of what we were doing at that
Yeah.
time, even though
Yeah.
that you're right, that
Yeah.
the year difference isn't
Yeah.
super substantial, but in terms of what we were doing on a
Exactly.
Saturday,
You know,
Saturday mornings was
it's a big
huge.
deal. You know, and it's
Yeah.
funny because some of the other shows we do here on the DJB Productions Network, we've actually talked about this because like some kind of conversation will come up, and be all like, "Well, hey, you remember that? Here we go, Saturday, Funcade, Supercade ran from 83 to 85.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah, so I
we were
was
in high school, but you
between
guys were
9.
probably still
Fun Kate?
Yeah, yeah, Saturday Supercade. Yeah, I think our producer there mistyped that. But
85. Wow.
But yeah, 83 to 85. So you figure for me, that was between the ages of 9 and 11, So even then, and it's,
Okay.
yeah, whatever. Yeah, I got you.
No. I know. I'm doing the math.
I'm referencing our little note there from our producer. Yeah, whatever. Anyway,
Okay. I was wondering that.
he
I
put a
was like,
little
no,
comment.
I
He
was
put a little comment up there. Yeah.
I was
Producer,
just doing the
do your,
math in my
do your
head.
job and produce. Yeah. I got your finger right here.
Yeah, hey, I got you.
But we kind of talk about the fact that even for me at that age, for Saturday morning cartoons, they even weren't a big deal for me, even because again, at that age, I kept talking about it, when we would talk about this on some of the other shows that we do. It's like you were watching that stuff until like an adult was awake.
yeah.
For me at that age, because it was like, okay, you're awake. Okay, now I can tell you I'm going, and again with younger age, I wasn't doing as much as you guys were doing, but it was like hey, all right, now cool. I'm on my bike. I'm outside playing. I'm getting dirty. I'm getting lost.
Right. Yeah.
Doing whatever.
Yeah.
But it was that tie-in, and then we even would see cereals. They put out cartoon themed cereals,
Mhm.
and video game themed cereals, and it was all over the place. But it was amazing. You couldn't, as the proverb says, you couldn't swing a dead cat and not hit something that was arcade or video game related in the early to mid 80s.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was just everywhere.
It's one of those fads that just never went away.
Yeah. It just changed form.
Yeah, exactly.
It just changed form. And it's like, and it's almost comes a little bit more fun now actually hitting an arcade when you have something, like now the big thing is like Dave and Buster's, and and I'm sure there's other, like here down here in South Carolina around Greenville, we've got a Dave and Buster's, we've got a place called Frankie's Fun Park, which is also got video games and go-karts and mini golf and whatever. I was like, and it's cool walking in there even now as an adult.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I know like Dave and Buster's now, they have like these giant have you guys seen the giant Space Invaders
Yes.
games at
No.
Dave and Buster's?
They have a giant Pac-Man now too.
Yeah. It's like instead of you're sitting in a chair and you've got like a gun and you're shooting at them.
Yeah.
on the screen, you know.
Oh, that's
and
nice.
and it's cool because then it's like I've sat there with my son and be like, let's do this, and we're sitting there playing this giant, you know, Space Invaders. It takes up an entire wall,
Right.
you know, and it's like, you know, and bonding over, you know, when I played this, the screen was no bigger than like a 13, you know, like 11 or 13-inch monitor, you know, and then maybe a 20-inch monitor if you were at home, if you had a 20-inch TV, you know. But it's like now you're playing it and it's, you know, an 8-9 foot, you know, diagonal, you know, screen, you know, and it's just awesome. And being able to bond over that.
And some of these cats had the chairs, like they got the whole, like they're in, you know, they got the whole. It's like having like a home theater.
Yeah.
You know, where they got the reality, you know, where the
virtual reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy shit, man.
Yeah. I was going to mention there's a Star Wars one that just came out like within the past 10 years or whatever. But it's the game itself is a pod. It's this big sphere. And you go in there and you sit and it's like you're in an X-Wing. And there's this big ass
there you go, yep.
But it's like you're in an X-Wing, and like I actually went into it trying to play it, and I was getting motion sickness because like the camera was just flipping everywhere, and it was like it was just so what's it called?
Vertigo?
No. I'm talking about just it's all around you, so it's like all encompassing, and it's you know, it's your reality at that moment, you know, and it's just I got motion sickness, everything. It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you know, and it didn't really take off, although because I think I only encountered 2 different games that use this. But I played them at like a Dave and Buster's. They had games that you would actually have to physically move and interact with. To where it actually had like motion sensors. The 2 that I remember, and the only 2 I ever saw, so I don't know if there were more of them, but there was one. It was a boxing one. All
right, producer.
It was boxing, and like you actually stood on it, and like there was like a section that came out like over top of you, and like a pad that you stood on, so it was like tracking your motion.
Oh,
and you had the controllers. They were essentially like boxing gloves. They looked like boxing gloves. They had like a little bar in the middle, and you grab them and you'd hold them like boxing gloves, and it was almost kind of like Mike Tyson's Punch Out for Nintendo.
Oh yeah.
But you'd box, and so like you had to literally bob and weave, and you're throwing jabs, and and the cool thing, and there was that one, and there was also like a police shootout one. So you had the light gun, and it's like you actually had to take cover behind obstacles and come out and shoot, and and it was great because it actually had like calorie counters in the corner of the screen.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
That's awesome.
And it was cool because it was like this whole thing of like, oh yeah, couch potato playing a video game. Well, this, I mean, like in the boxing one and the shooting one, you're building stuff up because like certain aspects, especially the the cop one, it was like it would move you to a certain spot, and people are shooting at you, and you're like behind cover. So you're leaning out and popping off rounds and crouching and standing up, and as I said in the boxing one, you're full on, like you're fighting somebody. You're in a full on fight. You're bobbing, weaving, ducking, and throwing punches.
Yeah.
And it's like we never could have imagined that. When we're dealing with original Space Invaders.
Can you imagine having something like I think everyone should have been like delivered that during COVID.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to have one of those in my house.
Kept them in shape, just like
love
especially here in Philly, especially in Philadelphia. Like, I got you, man.
You got you now, man. But yeah, I mean, it's just it was such a great time, because I mean, we had no idea where all this was going.
Yeah.
And I
but
mean,
at one point the arcades went away.
Yeah, I think unfortunately the home consoles were great.
Consoles definitely.
I'm not trying to be all negative, but I'm just throwing it out there. Like,
but it did. I mean, to a certain extent, because then it got to a point where it wasn't a situation of, Well, you played the home console when you couldn't get out to an arcade. It's like, well, now I got it at home. Why do I need to go to the arcade?
Kind of like what's happening to the theaters now, right? Like, you know, but you know, with the theaters answered that by going, hey, you know, you can come to the theater, kick back in the chair, we'll serve you beer, a burger, and fries.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
you can have dinner in a lot of these places. You can have dinner and a movie in all in the same place.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
but
I've
arcades,
actually seen ones. I think you can actually order like a steak and a beer. I mean, you're actually like eating like real food.
Oh yeah, no, I've done it.
Yeah.
You know, I actually drank them out of the beer they had. That's another episode. Moving on. But the arcades, you know, you can't really do that, right?
Yeah.
But do you think that there's a loss of? But maybe there isn't, because one of the things that the games, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm asking two cats that are doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, there became this interaction of games that you were playing with people across the globe, right? So you're online. And I've never done this, so this is more of a question, but I'm leading to the question. Is that you guys, you know, you get set up, you got your headphones on, get in your chair, and it doesn't look anything like that. I don't know why he's, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Looks like the calculator I did my taxes on 5 weeks ago. Moving on. So now you're online with people from all across the globe. Mm-hmm. You're playing with somebody from Budapest.
Yeah.
So the community is actually, here's the dichotomy to me, is that the community is wider than it's ever been, but it's actually
it's smaller though too, because unfortunately,
that's where I'm going.
It's unfortunately it what you get sometimes with the online games that you can play, you know, and interacting with other people, you get almost kind of like the same kind of people you'll get on social media to a certain degree.
Okay.
You know, so instead of it being a lot of times you're getting in there and dealing with somebody where it's like, okay, we're all having fun here. You get certain people who take things too seriously.
Yeah.
And because they're sitting in their chair at home behind a controller, say stuff that would get you punched in the face in real life.
Oh, big time.
You know, and unfortunately, you know, because I mean, I've been there, I've heard it, I've encountered it, you know, and thankfully, I mean, you can like, you know, you can block people and do everything else, but it's like there are certain people they've kind of lost the point of what that interaction's supposed to be, you know, to be, you know, I'll quick little story here, you know. I used to play the Call of Duty series on the Xbox all the time, you know, and one of these things where, you know, there were certain people who get so bent out of shape because like you do like use certain tactics or something and they get bent out of shape. And they're all like, the big thing is like, and again, you know, the camping, they call it. You find a spot and you hide, you know, and it's like, and people get like so bent out of shape because it's like, you know, there were certain spots, you know, in this, like a certain map, like I knew a spot I could hide, I could go prone, I could lay in a spot, wait for somebody to run by. You know, and I kind of figured out the amount of time I needed because, you know, in Call of Duty, they have a kill cam. So, like, they would actually show you, like, after you got killed, they would show you the other person killing
where that
you.
dude was hanging out.
So you can kind of see, you know,
who sniped you.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, you'd wait a certain amount of time, so you know that, you know, that kill cam only goes back a certain amount of time. Well, it's like, I already know they're kind of running down through this, you know, limited area. There's not many places they can go. You pop up, you run around the corner, you see them, pop them, and then run back, get in your spot. You know, and people get bent out of shape. You know, there's this one guy getting bent, camper. And there are other people in the room were kind of being real chill and laid back about it. It's like, yo, it's a military simulation. Yeah. You know, do you think in a military you're just going to be running around everywhere? No, you're going to find a spot where you know you've got certain, either you're going door to door or you're finding a spot to hide and waiting for your target to come by and pop them when they're unaware. You know, you're not just running willy-nilly down the street going, oh, you're over there. You know, you're a target.
You're trying to win the game. Is really what it is.
And it was funny because, like, I still remember this one night where this one guy, he's getting so bent out of shape because I had this one spot and you couldn't figure out where you were actually getting popped from. as long as you were like kind of looking down the scope kind of a thing. And he was getting so pissed because I'm popping him left and right, and I'm never moving. And he can't figure out where the hell I'm at. Oh no, campers. And I'm all like, yeah, it's like, you know what? I do camp. I camp so much my gamer tag should actually be Winnebago. And you could hear everybody else in the room laughing, and next thing you know, I'm getting inundated with like friend requests. You know? Because it's like, yeah, because it's like we're here to have fun. You know, lighten up. Either figure out how to kill me, or just don't come near me, whatever. And you know, but you're dealing with that. So I mean, unfortunately you get jerks like you do with everything else. Whereas when you were in the arcade, somebody was being a jerk like that, they didn't last long in the arcade.
Yeah.
It's like you didn't see them around
because
because
there was that's because there was human interaction.
Yeah.
Right?
And it was like, you know, people wouldn't mouth off because again, you didn't know who was going to punch you in the face. And if you had somebody who was, you know, you didn't usually see them too much because they knew nobody in there liked them, and everybody made it known.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
people
it's a crazy thing. It's a crazy thing.
You know.
Yeah, I was playing
Wild.
Uno on Xbox Live. Uno, a friggin' card game, right? And I beat this guy, and this guy was he was gonna come to my house. He was gonna F me and all this other stuff. And I'm like, dude, it's a friggin' card game. Like, what are you getting all excited for? Everybody's so tough when they're like, you know, behind a.
Well, yeah. What do they call that? Keyboard warriors.
Keyboard warriors. Yeah.
I had a guy.
It's like, hey,
yeah,
I'm a strong man.
Yeah.
I actually had a guy get online, you know, whatever, guy getting all bent out of shape. You could tell an English accent, whatever. And he's all like, hey, well, if I ever saw you, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, I can see you. Tell you what, tell me what your address is when I come over with my father-in-law. My father-in-law is British, you know, and I'm all like, yeah, next time I come over with my British father-in-law to visit family, I'll stop by and we'll have a chat.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh.
Hey, before we have our altercation, we should like some tea. Let's have some tea.
But I mean, but you know, again, video game. It's like we said earlier. You know, anything to a certain degree in the hands of the wrong person can be bad or it can be good. And I think, you know, overall, especially, you know, during the peak of the arcade and home, for the most part, it was a great community to be a part of. If you love playing video games, I mean, you could meet people and hang out and generally just have a great time and have that that wonderful social interaction.
Yeah.
That I think that we lose a lot now today.
Oh yeah. Look, if it wasn't for Aladdin's Castle, my career never would have had the trajectory it had. You know,
Yeah.
just hanging out at Aladdin's Castle, playing games. And me and my buddy, you know, we're the only two dudes in there at that time in the 80s with the long hair. And this girl walks up to us, and of course, me being the douche that I am, thinks that she's hitting on us. She's like, "Oh, you guys in a band?" I'm like, "Yeah." Meanwhile, she's like, "Oh, I'm a singer." Meanwhile, I'm sitting there playing Tempest. I'm like, "Yeah, you sing?" She's like, "Yeah, I sing." Comes over the next Saturday, blows our mind, like just sings like Pat Benatar on steroids. Started a band, and we're out there playing, like, you know, just
Nice.
from Aladdin's Castle.
Yeah.
You know? So, no, I didn't look like that.
No.
I didn't look like that.
Yeah. You had the cool long hair.
Yeah. There was no mullet going on in my world. But yeah, no, I mean, the culture was great, and I really liked how Stranger Things portrayed it because they portrayed it pretty accurately.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
I felt that they nailed it. Like, yeah, that's kind of what it felt like. You know, you had the big boys there who were like, you know, you knew these cats could play.
Yeah.
You know, and they were like, standing behind you, going, "Yo, hopefully that's your last quarter because I got shit to do. Get done because I got shit to do here."
Yeah.
But then when the home game started, that became, you know, and who knows? You know what? Maybe that was the beginning of everything that we now experience online.
Mhm.
Maybe it was the embryo or the genesis to that. Like, oh, I don't need to be out in public anymore. I can do it here. I can do great things with it. And then the internet came around. It's like, oh, now I can share it, but I can still share it from my world. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm saying that that's just the evolution of where it went. That's
it is what you make it.
Yeah.
It's what you make
that's
it.
Just my take on it. So,
but I don't know. I think yeah, we're getting a little bit long in the tooth here for timer. So yeah, there's the producer telling you, hey, you better wrap it up. Yeah.
All right, guys.
So
I very much enjoyed this. It was great seeing you all again.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Good seeing you too, Chris.
I love
Always a
learning
pleasure.
about this stuff that I seem to have skimmed on. So, all right, guys. I'll see you at Aladdin's Castle. How's that?
Yeah. So I guess I'll kind of take us out of here for Chris Gordon, Jason Leach. I'm Matt Sunner, and this has been Those Crazy 80s, the arcade craze edition. If you're liking the content, please like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. We do a lot of great stuff on here. We've got Those Crazy 80s now making its comeback. We've got Shit Your Pants Wednesday if you like horror movies. The DJs After Dark is making a bit of a revival planned coming through. We just have a lot of content on this channel. Subscribe, go into the playlists. If you can't find content that you enjoy on this channel, I don't know what you like because we got a little bit of something for almost everybody. So until the next time, we're out.